I've been real lucky lately. The stars have aligned so well that it almost makes me want to boast about it. I signed a large contract at work. After a drought of several years, I finally got a cute new girlfriend, and my luck just seems to keep going. And so, today, I can't wait to get home. The day I've been waiting for is finally here. Yes, that's right. The new game I've been waiting for all this time is finally out. One hour later. I ate dinner and finished cleaning up. Excited, I opened the App Store on my phone. Ugh. There wasn't enough space on my phone. Well, that was the wind taken out of my sails. I had to delete some videos or apps or something. What's this? There was some data I didn't recognize in the folder. Curious, I opened it. That was the nearby park, right? Did I film that by mistake? I didn't really understand what was going on, but I deleted it. Today, for the first time in a while, I finally had a day off. I enjoyed walking around and eating some food, and returned home in a fantastic mood. I checked the photos I took as I lay on my bed. What's this video? Suddenly, there was a black thumbnail amongst the photos. Curious, I opened it. Maybe I accidentally pressed the button. Still, it sure did record from an odd angle. This was... yeah, I had no idea. Let's delete it. I deleted the video that didn't make a whole lot of sense. There has been a lot of strange data on my phone recently. I checked the folders as I looked through the photos of my lunch. Ugh, there it is again. I wasn't quite sure how to feel, but at any rate, I opened the file. Is this my apartment? So then, I really did accidentally record it. Alright, and it's gone. I deleted the video that made little sense. I've been so tired lately. Looked like I had a fever as well. Did I catch a cold? Yeah, I should go to bed early tonight. I climbed into bed and flicked through my phone with well-practiced fingers. Perhaps because of what had been going on, it had become a daily habit to check my folders now. Is this... Furrowing my brow, I opened the data that I didn't recognize. outside my room? I was suddenly overcome with an indescribable fear. I deleted the weird video. I really hope there's no strange video today. Nervously, I checked the folder in my phone. I was too scared to look at it head on, so I turned my head and peeked at it at the corner of my eye. What on earth is this? My hands shook as the video played. I was so surprised that I threw my phone. At that very moment, I sensed someone behind me. Pushing down my fear, I readied myself and turned around. As far as I can recall, I've been involved in 3 accidents throughout my life. Not only that, but they've all gone the exact same way. All 3 times I was riding my bike. All 3 times I was hit turning a corner by a car that didn't stop. And all 3 times, the front wheel on my bike was crushed from the right-hand side. It's a terribly strange story, but there's one more coincidence that makes it feel like it was fate. That's right. All 3 times, I escaped alive, without injury. This happened when I was only a child. Being a child, I was up late reading manga in bed. Suddenly, I felt something tickle the big toe on my right foot. I was the only person in my room. Wondering if maybe I'd forgotten to put away another book or toy or something, I slowly sat up and looked down at my feet. There it was. A lively black bug, the type that makes most people go pale. I was unable to even scream. I jumped away from this black bug as it moved around, yet, for me, a child who was unable to see ghosts, it was, without a doubt, the most frightening thing to happen to me during the summer. It was a terribly humid summer. And can you believe it? The inn where my family stayed on holiday was surrounded by hundreds of giant hornets. No, it wasn't just the surroundings. They all buzzed around inside the building as well, like they owned the place. It was like the inn itself was a hornet's nest. But worst of all was when I was in the large public bath. As I was washing myself, a hornet flew above my head. My father next to me suddenly stood up, and I still remember the moment he splashed hot water from the bath on the hornet. It was a moment that a human was at their most vulnerable, and on top of that, he was flushed from the heat as well. He would have been in for a lot of pain if he got stung at that moment. I admired his daring. When we were leaving the next morning, for some reason, the owner of the inn presented us with a bag full of daikon. It was no doubt a token of his appreciation. This happened when I was a student. I worked with someone at my part-time job who was 6 years older than me. The job didn't agree with me, and I quit just a few months in, but after that, my colleague still invited me out to lunch. It was around this same time that I suddenly received an email from an unknown woman. Male friends was a term that existed at the time, and I wasn't exactly a very wary person then either. I was easily taken in by her. No, I don't even know if she was a woman to begin with, but I started replying to her messages. After that, whenever my colleague invited me out to eat, I got a message from her saying she'd eaten the same thing. After hanging out with my colleague, I'd have plans to meet with this woman, but she always cancelled at the last minute. Looking back on it now, there was something I should have realised. Let's continue. This went on for over a year, and we never met. And for some reason, she always ate the same food as my former colleague. She was always nearby when we hung out, she would tell me via mail. Deeply suspicious, I finally made up my mind. One day, when I was out eating with my former colleague, "That woman is actually you, isn't it?" I said jokingly. My colleague laughed and tried to play it off like, "No way." I returned home when we were done eating, and then sent an email informing this woman that I would no longer be talking to her. My doubts had been confirmed. After that, I received dozens of annoying messages every day. They got so bad I had to change my address. They stopped arriving after that, but my former colleague is probably still trying to send those annoying messages to me, pretending to be her. Lastly, I haven't made this clear yet, but let me tell you what gender we are. We're both men. Have you ever heard the story of the Bloodstained Classroom? It's one of the 7 school mysteries. O, from the class next to mine, came over to say something. "Let's all go check it out," he said with a smile. We all looked at each other. We were curious and got swept up in the mood, so we all agreed to go after school. We gathered at school once it got dark, and then made our way towards the music room with O. When we opened the door, the faint shadow of the piano spread out before us. That's kinda creepy, I thought as we went inside. O stood behind us all, and, as he closed the door, "Just a little longer," he mumbled. Everyone turned to look at O. He grinned. "What the hell, man?" One of the boys yelled, and the girls jumped in surprise at his sudden voice. Suddenly, a sound came from the piano. Everyone turned to look at it at once. Then O shuffled over to it and glanced down at the notes. It says, "O sacred head, now wounded," he said with a smile. Everyone gulped, and the room fell silent. "There's blood coming from the ground." Looking at the ground, there was blood pouring out from the floor. Blood continued to pour forth, and as it gradually swallowed us whole, everything went black. Have you ever heard the story of the Bloodstained music room? O, from the class next to us, said. We all looked at each other. "Sounds interesting. I'll go ask the others." When I turned around to go ask the others, I suddenly saw O's face. He was grinning. As a library assistant, it's my job to clean up the library before school ends each day. As I was cleaning up the index cards, I found one that had fallen beneath the counter. Huh? I didn't think it was there during lunchtime, but maybe somebody dropped it as they were putting their stuff away. Picking it up to check what it was, the title of the book had been scratched off, so I couldn't read it. I'll check it when I put all the books back. The person who borrowed it was... O was written on it. I think he was in the second grade class, right at the end. I put the card in the empty, currently being borrowed section. Then I opened the library door as sunlight filtered in through the west window. Is it closing time already? A male student holding a book stood right in front of me. The male student said he was here to return the book, so I turned to return to the desk. However, the student was nowhere to be seen, and the only thing there was the book on the desk. Did he go home already? Confused, I looked over at the currently being borrowed section. Huh? The card isn't here. I had definitely put the card there, but now it was gone. Oh well, I'd look for it the next day. I put the book back on the counter and once again turned towards the door. Eh? The door won't open. Why? No matter what I did, the door wouldn't open, and no matter how much I yelled, nobody came. Neither the unlocked windows nor the floor-level windows would open either. How much time passed after that, I wonder? The unchanging western sun shone on me as I leaned against the library wall. There's a strange rumour at our school. There's a certain student who, despite never having joined or transferred to our school, graduates. Of course, it's nothing more than a rumour, but every time it always happens in the second grade class at the end of the West Hall. This story gets passed around every time students move up to the third grade. Huh? Wasn't this person in our class? Eh? Who? You know, that guy in our class. Isn't he from another class? It's a strange story. Supposing someone disappeared, then you could easily check the seating chart or the student list and figure it out quickly. So that's why it's not like someone disappeared, but rather that they were never there all along. But every year, someone in that class always says the same thing. So why do people think that someone who wasn't there was there? Come to think of it, there were all sorts of rumours about that class before, but the most common one was the story of a student nobody knew who stood in front of the class after school. It's a common enough story, and apparently lots of people have tried such a thing before, but there wasn't a single person who said they had met him before. Rumours come about because there's some sort of evidence, right? So then, why is that story so common? Don't you think that's strange? Talking about this suddenly reminded me of something. Apparently there was a guy who heard about this story from someone who knew of it. What do you think he said? "We switched," he answered with a smile. It was after school, just like now, and he couldn't see his face thanks to the sunlight coming in from the west. I'm pretty sure he said his name was O. That's the end of the story, so I guess I can leave it there, huh? Alright, I'm heading back to class. I was practicing during the summer holidays in preparation for August's wind instrument competition. "This is a scary story I heard from my dad last night," Dina said, putting her clarinet down on the desk. I was pretty fed up with practice as well, so I put my flute back in its case as though I'd been waiting for this moment. All the third graders disappeared for cram school in the afternoon, and our head teacher only popped his head in on occasion as well. The air-conditioned music room was heaven to us second graders, and for the past few days, we had been sharing scary stories with each other. Long ago, our school apparently had an incinerator where they burnt all the burnable trash. Yeah, I know that. They got rid of it because a boy from some elementary school got burnt by it, right? I summarized some horror video I'd seen before, and Nina rolled her eyes. What the hell is that supposed to mean? By burnt, you mean murdered? Nanako, another clarinet player next to us, said. Apparently, it was treated as an accident. But it sounds pretty sus. No, that's not it. Then Dina started talking, her tone dark. When my father was in the third grade of junior high, oh yeah, he's a graduate of this school, but anyway, that incinerator was still here at the time. Dina's family had run a cleaning business in town since her grandfather's generation. Right after the Obon holidays, a student who arrived for club activities opened the incinerator to throw out some trash, and he heard this loud scream, and then a cat jumped out. This cat stank. Apparently, the smell disappeared once the cat ran off. It was a strange smell, kind of like something rotten, but also like nothing he'd ever smelt before. And that smell gradually started to waft out of the incinerator. Inside it, they found the dead body of a boy from the class next to my father's. I frowned, like, and Nanako seemed quite happy as she listened. A murder? The cause of death was illness, or rather, heat stroke. But the problem was why his body was in there. Ever since he started junior high, that boy had been bullied. The father of the leader of the group who bullied him at the time was a local member of parliament and the chairman of the PTA. The lid of the incinerator was made of heavy steel, making it impossible to open from the inside, so apparently the incident was treated as an accident. So that's why they got rid of it. It had to have been a murder, right? They put him in there and he couldn't get out. Even if his direct cause of death was heat stroke. Nanako said with a serious look on her face, and Nina slowly nodded her head. Dad said the same thing. He and that boy were in the same class in elementary school, and they often played together, so he went to his funeral. Apparently, a few days after that funeral, several rumours started to spread throughout town. And then, one night, the summer holidays were about to end, so my father was at a friend's house with some others finishing their homework. This meant he was late returning home. According to Dina's father, it was already dark, past 8 p.m. at the time. He smelt something horrid on the way home. He turned around, and there was a single dirty cat there. Not you, my father said the cat said. But there was something strange about that cat. Looking back on it, that cat's eyes were human. They were white, just like a human's eyes. What do you think? Dina asked us, looking somewhat troubled. I understood what Dina wanted to say, that cats also have whites in their eyes. But normally, we only saw the black part of a dog or cat's eyes. Maybe that cat was cursed. What happened to the bullies? Apparently, most of them died in accidents or of illness. It sounds made up, doesn't it? That's a real curse. And if so, it wouldn't be that strange for the story to spread even further, right? Dina gave a heavy response to Nanako's question. Perhaps it was so real that, on the contrary, nobody felt like they could talk about it. My dad said that nobody could talk about it all that time. I have a question. Why did your father decide to tell you this story now then? Because he saw it again. That cat. It was a Saturday night, 2 weeks earlier. Apparently, Dina's father went out for company drinks in town. And he was just about to start heading home. You're not waiting for Dad to get home, are you? You're waiting for the ice cream. Nina and her younger sister waited excitedly, and as they heard the door open, they saw their father's pale face. "Oh, what's wrong?" they asked him, worried, but he told them to bring some salt, and that was all he would say. Then, last night, he finally spoke to Nina, and Nina alone. That cat appeared again. That cat with the human eyes that smelt like rotting flesh. I don't think he'll do anything to us, but be careful, Nina. If you smell something strange in a dark place, make sure you escape to a crowded area right away. Nina's father was always happy and smiling, much like Nina herself. It was impossible to think that he would lie to try to scare his kids. Club finished for the day, and after we left through the school gate, we all stopped in our tracks. There it is. Nina, Nanako and I all said together. Although it wasn't there in the morning, the poster board for city council candidates had gone up and was already covered in posters. 2 generations in a row of a first-time candidate running with the slogan, "Cherish your hometown." There was also a poster on the telephone pole for the speeches that would be held at the nearby public hall. 42. That's the same age as my father. Has that cat come to finish off the final one? Nina nodded several times like that had to be it, and then went home. As expected, that candidate didn't become a member of the city council, but nobody thought that even his father, a former city council member, would die as well. Looks like another cooking teacher has disappeared. Eh? But they've only been here for a month. I overheard the teachers talking in the staff room. Whenever something happened in the cooking room, the cooking teacher would always stop coming back. Curious, I looked into the rumours of the cooking room. You can hear a strange sound in the cooking room after school. Water flows by itself from the taps in the cooking benches. A dark figure stands in the room. There were all sorts of stories like that. What on earth went on in that room? I decided I would go and check for myself after school. Our school's cooking room was in the old school building, a separate building to the rest of the school. It was a rather old wooden building that was falling apart, and the lights, which were still the original lights, flickered here and there, making it rather dark. That was no doubt why people thought they saw all sorts of things. I opened the wooden sliding door to the old building. An uncomfortable breeze blew in from the back. The wooden floor creaked beneath my feet. Normally, this never bothered me, but now it did. Feeling strangely uncomfortable, I arrived at the cooking room. I looked through the glass window in the door. I could see a figure standing inside, lit up by the western sun. Someone was there. I was afraid, and yet I opened the door and went in. When the figure saw me, they spoke. Huh? What's wrong? School's over. Seemed it was a regular student, I forgot something, so I came to pick it up. He smiled. I told him I came to check out the rumours regarding the cooking room. Huh, that's neat. If it were me, I really wouldn't want to be left here all alone, he said, and then exited the room. Splash. The sound of water falling echoed throughout the room. I looked over at the cooking bench, and water was coming out of the tap. The water stopped when I turned the tap off, and then the room fell silent. Time passed uneventfully, and I gradually grew fed up. It was starting to get dark, so I turned towards the door to go home. Splash. I heard water behind me. I turned around and water was dripping from that same tap again. It was a little creepy, but I turned it off again. Despite the fact the water was off, it wouldn't stop. On the contrary, it was coming out faster, filling up the sink even though there was no plug in it. As I was looking at the water, something looked back at me from inside it. I grew frightened and ran for the door. Numerous dark figures stood in front of the door, as though to keep me from going out. The sound of water flowing echoed in the dimly lit room. I ran for the window. But there, I saw something unbelievable. Was that a person? No, there was no way a black figure like that could actually exist. A dark figure crawled out of the cooking bench, and its unfocused eyes looked at me. Water poured forth from all the other benches, and more figures crawled out. I was so scared that I fell to the ground. More and more figures appeared, and they stumbled towards me. Numerous voices filled the room, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. These dark figures surrounded me, and I heard a voice right next to my ear. Apparently, this building used to function as a hospital for soldiers during the war. It also used to function as a place where soldiers who couldn't move their lower halves could learn to move again. The benches in the cooking room were used for that purpose back then. And apparently that scary place used to be the cooking room. The teachers were in a panic this morning, and so I couldn't talk to them, but a boy named Okun came over and told me about the cooking room. And then, at the end, he smiled and said, "It's dangerous, so you really shouldn't go there." Any school, no matter where you go, will have its own 7 school mysteries, but most of them are very similar. I think most of the toilet ones especially are the same, but at our school, it's different. At our school, they say that the spirit of a female student appears in the boys' toilets. Most boys, when they hear of this story, look awful happy about it. But, not long after, their happy faces gradually harden, and by the time the story is over, that look turns to fear. This story relates to boys from our school. In other words, it's like a curse placed upon us boys. There are several rules, and you're not allowed to speak of it to the teachers or girls. You're also not allowed to tell anyone from outside the school, your immediate family, relatives, or anyone from another school either. Meaning, the only other people you're allowed to talk to about it are boys from our school. When you enter the boys' toilets after school, someone will knock on the door. After a few knocks, you'll hear a girl's voice on the other side. Is anyone in there? I don't think there's a single male student who hasn't heard this story. Like, why is there a girl in the boys' toilets? Do you want to know what you're supposed to do? That's the problem, after all. At this point in time, nobody knows what to do if the girl knocks on the door while you're in there. You might be thinking, if nobody knows what to do, then is everyone okay? It's fine. It seems that as long as you share this story with another boy, then she won't knock, nor ask you a question. That's why the correct answer is telling someone else the story, and then telling them to pass it on. Maybe nothing will happen if you don't share the story, and maybe nobody has ever actually heard her voice for real either. So, why do you have to tell someone else the story? Well, it's creepy, isn't it? It's not like you have to do it, but it's kind of like an unspoken rule, you know? That's why I'm telling you this story right now. You should quickly tell another male student as well. Because I don't know how long it will take for her to appear after you hear the story. Alright, see you later. You take care now. I finally told the story to someone else. I was the last student in my class to hear it, so there was nobody else left to tell. But thankfully, there was one more guy in the next class who hadn't heard it yet. But he was kinda weird. He was smiling the whole time and was kinda creepy. Ah well, who cares? That has nothing to do with me after all. After holding it in all that time, I finally went to the toilets. After all, when you need to go, you need to go. As I was basking in the afterglow, suddenly a knock reverberated throughout the door. My heart thumped loudly, and the afterglow now gone, I suddenly found it hard to breathe. Knock, knock. It echoed again and again. After a brief silence, I heard a voice on the other side of the door. Is there anyone in there? It didn't make any sense. I told the story to someone else, didn't I? I heard the voice again. I had no idea how to answer. But either way, I had to say something. Nervously, I answered. I'm in here. Silence fell before I heard a voice. No, you're not in there. That voice was full of intense hatred and deep malice. Suddenly, I felt the sensation of being grabbed, and I looked down. Numerous pale hands were reaching out of the walls and holding on to me. These pale hands pulled me with great force into the wall. I stuck to the wall, unable to breathe or move. The hands pulled even tighter, and my body started to tear apart. A heavy, dull, and wet sound echoed throughout the toilets. The last student is finally gone. What about T-sensei? He said he wasn't feeling very well, so he went to the toilet. A student screamed, their face turning pale. In the toilets! Someone has... Several teachers rushed to the toilets, and there they saw arms sticking out of the wall and a terrifying amount of red liquid. And on the ground, dyed red, lay T-sensei's name tag. "5 minutes from the station, right next to a convenience store. 4 small single apartments with a kitchen, dining room and living room. The perfect conditions for those starting their university lifestyles the following week. Starting today, this is my house. The first floor consists of the manager's office and such, but there's only someone there during weekday mornings. I should be careful not to make so much noise that it upsets the neighbours, but it seems I don't have to worry about walking around or the vibrations of the washing machine. Alright, guess I should take the rubbish out. I tied up the bag and went to dispose of it. Oh, good evening. I passed a young woman on the stairs. Perhaps she was a neighbour, so I returned her greeting. I just moved into room 202. I'm Nagatoro. I'm Sakai, from 201. Sakai-san answered. Then she placed her left hand to her mouth and smiled. I saw something glisten on her ring finger. I'm sorry if we make too much noise. I was no doubt tired from moving in. The faint makeup on her lips seemed to creepily warp. The rent seemed awfully cheap. After moving in, I finally understood why. The walls were thin. Not so much the case for room 203, but I could hear everything taking place in Sakai-san's apartment in 201. I quickly bought some wireless headphones. I spent my days listening to music to drown out the other sounds. So long as they were normal sounds and conversations, the music blocked them out. So long as they were normal. It seemed the Sakais didn't get along so well. The husband would return home in the evenings, and it seemed every day they fought. They would fight about the house not being clean, about going out for drinks without word, about the taste of dinner, and so on. They were so loud that not even my music could drown them out. How depressing. The Sakais are fighting again today. I turned the volume in my headphones up, but I can still hear them. I can hear all sorts of flower names being tossed around like begonia, rose, and sumide. Seemed today they were fighting about taking care of plants. No matter what you do, you're not treating them well enough. They're left on the veranda at lunchtime. Isn't that enough? If you care that much, then you should water them. That's not the problem here. Day by day, they're getting worse. What's with that tone of voice? You're the one who brought them here in the first place. And what's with your tone of voice? Oh, shut up. They can't talk, so it's not like they can complain. Bang. The sound of a slap reverberated. Just when I thought things had finally gone quiet, there was the sound of glass breaking. What the hell? Hey, what are you holding? You! Stop it! Bang. Huh? I quickly turned the volume on my headphones up to max and crawled into bed. I pulled the blanket up over my head. I pushed my headphones closer to my ears and repeatedly pressed the side switch to turn the volume up. Murder? No, I mustn't have heard things right. Nobody would kill another person over a simple argument. The sound of the music at max volume swirled around my head, alongside anxiety. At some point, my hands started shaking. I was also covered in a sheen of sweat. It was humid, but I had no intention of removing the blanket. The music was so loud that I wouldn't be able to sleep, and as the morning light turned things white, both my head and my ears were tired. My ears rang, but I still couldn't take my headphones off. I was scared. I didn't want to hear anything. Unable to bear it any longer, I went outside. I wanted to breathe some air that wasn't from my own apartment. As I exited to the hall, I saw Miss Sakai carrying a large rubbish bag as she walked away from me. My eyes dropped to the bag. There was another black bag inside it, so I couldn't see what was in there. She turned around. The door to room 201 was right there. If she was just throwing the rubbish out, then it was unlikely to be locked. I was gripped by the desire to see inside. I wasn't sure whether it was because I wanted to see something frightening or because I wanted to confirm that her husband was still okay. Supposing that her husband was still inside. As strange as it might sound, that would mean I could chalk it up to me mistaking the wrong room. But if not, then it would be the first time I would ever have to call the police. 119? No, it was 110, right? I stared at the door, unable to move. But then, the door opened. A man wearing a suit was inside. Inevitably, our eyes met. Can I help you? I knew that voice. I'd heard it screaming numerous times. This was the husband. That's our neighbour, I told you. He moved in the other day. There was a voice from behind. The wife had returned. Hi. I took my headphones off and greeted him. It would have been rude not to, but that wasn't the only reason. It seemed I'd gotten everything all wrong. I didn't need to wear these anymore. That sound I heard was undoubtedly just something breaking. Nagatoro-kun, would you like to come inside? we've got some leftover sweets from home. Come to think of it, I hadn't eaten either dinner or breakfast. Unable to fight the hunger any longer, I followed her inside. Sorry. Thanks for inviting me in. I went to take my sneakers off at the door when I noticed something. A child's shoes. A name was written on the inside. Sakai Sumide. Ah, sorry. I'll throw those out together soon. There was a capsule toy with human body parts in it. Just as it sounds, inside you could find body parts. I put some money in and turned the knob. It clinked as the money went through, and a black capsule came out. I opened it, and inside was a large eyeball. It was a beautiful eye, green like a field. I wanted more like it, so I turned the knob over and over. A wrist, pancreas, heart, leg, brain. All sorts of body parts I couldn't care less about, but not the one thing I wanted, the eyeball. On top of that, I had no money left. What the hell was this? Angry, I threw the capsule. I shook the machine in both hands, but no more capsules came out. And so I hit it over and over. But still, nothing came out. I just wanted the eyeball. The eyeball! And then I realized something. If I wanted an eyeball, then they were all around here, weren't they? A series of violent killings have perplexed police in Nani Nani City. Oh, shut up, I said and turned the TV off. The newscaster continued explaining to the best of their ability who was involved and what was going on. Who cared? For me, the most important thing was still to come. People's eyeballs are so beautiful. I stared at the eyeball soaking in a bottle of alcohol, enchanted by it. Most Japanese people had brown eyes, but there were some with green, blue, etc. as well. Albino people had red eyes as well. Well then, what type of eye would I hunt for today? Human body part capsule toy. What the hell? I stopped before a strange capsule toy machine. It was called a human body part capsule toy. According to the explanation, it sold human body parts. For real? If so, there was a part I very much wanted. I put some money into the machine. Ka-ching! Gacha gacha. Ka-kong. A round black case came out. I opened it. What the? This isn't a heart. I had a younger sister who was born with heart troubles. I wanted a heart for her. 100 yen. If I just had that, would it be enough? I turned the knob over and over, but the only body parts that came out had nothing to do with a heart. Damn it! I don't want this! Damn! I kicked the machine, but nothing came out. Damn it! What on earth did I have to do to get a heart for my sister? I could do that. An idea flashed in my head. Manami, congratulations on getting out of the hospital. Yeah, I have to live my best life to repay the person who gave me this heart, Mum. That's right. I've no doubt that's what your brother wanted as well. On that note, why didn't he come to see me, even though I'm out of the hospital now? I'm sorry. He's gone to study overseas now. He's never coming back to Japan again. I'm in the process of making a woman. When I found the human body parts capsule toy machine, I became even more determined. A human body parts capsule toy. Just as the name suggested, it was a capsule toy with a body part inside. What would happen if you joined all those body parts together? I was beyond curious. I decided to try it out. After buying numerous capsules, I came to understand one thing. The body parts belonged to a woman. But not only that, but either they were cloned or they all belonged to the same woman. Today, I've created 4 unfinished women. I looked at the women I created from the capsule toys. Unfortunately, not a single one was complete. There was one body part I hadn't obtained yet. I don't have the eyes. Maybe it had something to do with the recent spate of killings where people had their eyeballs removed. With that on my mind, I looked at the women. Well, I guess I could just make them myself. Or maybe there was someone out there monopolizing their eyes. After several weeks, I came into possession of a large number of eyeballs. I had them. And the dead body of a woman lay in front of me. Just when I thought I'd finally gotten an eye from the capsule toy, this woman attacked me. That was why I hit her with the same hatchet she attacked me with. I should turn myself in for this, right? It was justifiable self-defense. Hello? Is this the police? I called the police. A few days later, I learnt something from the investigation. The woman who attacked me was the one responsible for all the murders taking place. Long ago, I spent a long time in the hospital. I was born with a bad heart, and they said I wouldn't live until adulthood. But I'm 18 now. Due to a change in the law, I'm now a fine adult. And at present, there's something I'm really into. Putting together the parts from the human body capsule toys. Just as it sounds, it's a capsule toy with human body parts inside. I realized something when I saw this machine on the street corner. The body parts inside, they all came from me. It was 2 days ago that I realized this. After meeting the man who pulled 4 of me, he said something. You're the original. I'm so happy to finally meet the real thing. Now, I'm in the process of building myself. For a certain reason. To clear someone's conscience. And so, I put all the body parts together and created another me. Hello, me. Goodbye, me, I said, and killed her with a hatchet. I know. I know all about it. The heart I received when ill was from my dead brother. My brother killed himself to save me. I couldn't forgive myself. Nor that man who pulled the other me's. Or that man who tried to stop me. And so, several hours later, I stood before the human body parts capsule toy machine. That's right. I have to kill me. That machine was full of my body parts. I had to deal with them all quickly. I destroyed the machine with the bloody hatchet. The capsules tumbled out and the body parts laid bare. At that moment, I was at a loss for words. Because an eyeball that looked just like the green of my brother's was looking right at me. Have you ever felt something was wrong when you woke up? Like you're in an entirely different world now. Contradictions where yesterday's norm is now something completely different. On my way home from completing the shopping, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, a runaway car drove up onto the footpath, and in an instant, everything went blank. When I next opened my eyes, I was looking at the white roof of a hospital room. I stayed there briefly, but I wasn't badly injured, so I was soon able to leave. Things soon returned to normal as I went back to work and hanging out with my friends. Then, that day arrived. When I woke up, the colours were completely unreal. The shape and colours of the furniture had changed to something that looked like it came from a video game. Yeah, this place was another world. Maybe it was a dream. There was something that looked like a knife in front of me. I lifted it and then brought it down on my own arm and leg, but there was no pain. Instead, there were numbers that appeared with a red effect. It was hard to believe, but it seemed I really had found myself in another world. The daily life I wanted to leave behind had changed in an instant. The moment I realized I could start all over again, a feeling of both excitement and anxiety welled up within me. My former room. I searched the room that was now something different. I obtained food and a small tablet. These were perhaps the nutritional bars I bought and my smartphone. Maybe they came with me from the world I was just in. They looked and were completely different, but somehow I could guess what they were. I tried to use my former smartphone, the small tablet. There was a message on it. I'm heading your way now. What did that mean? Normally there'd be a tutorial, right? Images of the alternate universes I knew of flashed in my mind. A certain matter appeared in the back of my head. Yeah, a type of tutorial. The character that was coming now was part of a chain of events. A short while later, there was a knock at the colourful door. I nervously reached for the door handle and opened it. On the other side of the door stood an ugly goblin brandishing a club. I jumped back in surprise. I jumped back so forcefully I fell over. The goblin screamed and raised the club and then ran towards me. I had no idea what was going on. Suddenly, I remembered the weapon I was holding. Oh yeah, this is the first battle of the tutorial. I swiftly raised the knife and brought it down on the goblin's throat. The goblin let out a shrill scream and fell forward. Purple blood poured endlessly from the wound. I pushed past the goblin and stood up. This was a tower defense with real combatants. Yeah, this was a tower defense. The goal was to defend my fort from outside forces. I looked down at the goblin that had stopped moving, and it had dropped an item. I picked it up. I obtained fruit alcohol. Seemed it was a drink, but it said alcohol. Back in the real world, I liked wine and other sour fruity drinks. I tried some of the drink to celebrate winning my first battle. It was delicious. It was like sparkling wine, with a pleasant bubbling sensation as it passed down my throat. This was my reward. I finished the drink in one go, and the day was over. Some time passed after my first battle, but the next event never made itself known. Was I overlooking something? It slightly bothered me that the goblin didn't disappear as well. Plus it stank horribly. It seemed I might have to clean it up myself. Searching the room, I found a bag. I put the goblin in the bag and went outside. Outside also looked different, and the sky was an unbelievable pastel blue. The clouds also looked like they were painted yellow. The bag the goblin was in was heavy, and it made a dull sound as it hit the ground. Looking around, I spotted a disposal area. I placed the bag there. Suddenly, some human-looking things turned this way and started talking. Perhaps I'd triggered a flag. I had to rush back to my fort and prepare to defend it. I hurried back. I waded back in the fort with bated breath. No doubt an event was about to happen soon. That is to say, the next tower defense was about to begin. I didn't even know if I could do the shopping in this world, so I hadn't eaten since the last time. Perhaps this next event would drop some money or food. If it didn't, then it would no doubt be game over. I absolutely could not fail. The door slowly opened. On the other side stood a witch draped in black. She started muttering something. Crap! There were witches in this world? So then, she was chanting a spell. Standing in the rear of the fort, I jumped up, and then I rushed towards the witch. Perhaps in a hurry, the witch's chant grew even louder. I couldn't let her finish it. I leapt forward and grabbed the witch. As we tumbled to the ground, I thrust the knife into her chest. I calmed my ragged breathing. Relaxing my grip on the knife, I looked down at the unmoving witch. Liquid poured out of the spot where she was stabbed. It stank terribly. After catching my breath, I searched for my booty, but the witch didn't drop anything. I turned towards the door and something had been placed there. Nervously, I approached and then picked it up. It was food. I grabbed the food and shoved it into my mouth. I'd never seen the shape before, but it tasted just like a rice ball. As I basked in the aftermath of eating for the first time in a long time, there was a noise by the door. Crap! Was there another wave coming? I picked up the knife by my side and then jumped for the door as I turned towards it. There were 3 tiny bodies with wings on their backs. They were fairies. The moment I saw them, I was briefly confused, but stopping was a mistake. The fairy screamed and left. Crap. Those fairies were no doubt going to get reinforcements. The next battle was going to be even tougher. I searched for a weapon. Before the next event, I'd obtain a new weapon. Those were the rules. After looking around, I found a flamethrower, small, and fuel in the closet. This was it. I put the fuel into the flamethrower, small, and tried it out. A small flame burst out, but it was about the same range as the knife. It would be hard to hit the fairies with the knife. That was why burning them would be more efficient. I prepared myself for the fairies' attack. The moment they appeared, I'd get them all at once. There was a sound at the door, and a small shadow appeared on the ground. I didn't know how they would attack. I had to move first. I jumped forward as several small shadows approached the door, and attacked with the flamethrower, small. Several fairies screamed. They went up in flames, their arms and legs flailing as they hit the ground. I did it! I won! I looked over and there was still one left, screaming something as it fled. The next attack would be even bigger. I had to find something new. I looked all over, but found nothing. Seemed I wouldn't get anything until I eliminated all the fairies. Things went well back in the previous world, but it seemed I'd kind of failed. I'd come all this way to another world, so I had to do well next time. Kata. I turned around when I heard something by the door. 2 armoured knights, one white, one black, stood there. Crap! I grabbed the flamethrower, small, and turned it towards them. Bang, bang! There was a sound like an explosion, and something sent a shock through me. Did they get me? Well, that was fine. I'd just do better in the next world. The world turned black, and a wave of extreme sleepiness swallowed me. It has been 1 day since the horrific events that took place in T-Town. The vivid remains still linger. In a wildly deranged state, the perpetrator, ignoring all warnings and spouting nonsense, was fired upon as they attacked. A 79-year-old woman, the caretaker, and her grandson, 9, who came to visit, with 4 of his friends, were victims. The perpetrator was seen carrying a large black bag to the garbage disposal area numerous times. The wanted man is also under suspicion for the serial killings of several children, and police are currently confirming his identity. Items belonging to a man suspected of being an accomplice were also found in the room. A knife, gas torch, and... Police plan to continue their investigations once the suspect regains consciousness. It appears that as a result of wanting to flee to another world, only his consciousness did, The warning did say to read the instructions carefully. Oh well. Oh my, a guest. It appears they're interested in the showcase mirror. And what will appear in the mirror with the fascinating history? Perhaps another time, when the end has come. Why am I here? Why can't I go outside? Why does nobody come to see me? Why? Morning! So said my sister Tsuru as she looked down at me. She was wearing a beautiful kimono, and she looked at me with a sparkling smile. Breakfast time, she said, and then she put down the plates with rice balls and pickles in their fixed positions. I stood up and sat in my usual spot. I put my hands together and then started eating. I shoved food into my mouth, and my sister laughed behind me. Wondering what she was laughing at, I turned around and she said, "And what is this?" She was holding something I'd never seen before. I tilted my head. Seeing me like that, a slight scowl took over my sister's face. Why was she angry? I had no idea. This is a doll. A doll. She then showed me this thing she called a doll. It was the first time I'd ever seen such a thing, and it was wearing a kimono just like my sister's. Father bought it for me. The kimono goes with mother's too. She held the doll tight and continued speaking happily. What the? Something deep inside me felt warm. I couldn't take my eyes off that doll. Several months again after that day, my sister came to see me again. Here, I don't need it anymore, so you can have it. She pushed something towards me. My eyes opened wide in astonishment. She was holding the doll I saw that day. I clutched it to my chest, and I was so happy that I bowed my head over and over. My sister left without saying a word. Left alone in the room, I often looked at the doll. It was coming apart here and there, but I was still overjoyed that I had my very first personal possession. Oh yeah, I should give it a name. I decided to call the doll Mayu. I looked up at the sky spread above me and smiled. I could hear a voice. It sounded like words, but also not words. As I flung myself up, I saw Mayu. I stared at her in a daze, and then there was a loud bang. That doll! Oh, whatever. Come on, eat up. My mother, with wrinkles on her forehead, turned harsh eyes towards me. I put my hands together and then started eating. When I was done, I washed the dishes with water from the jar and then quickly handed them to my mother. She almost snatched them from me, and then she left without even turning around. I clutched Mayu with trembling hands. This is the same dream I had yesterday. I woke up from the dream, unable to hear what was being said. Are you still sleeping? I jumped in surprise at my father's angry voice. Seriously, this is why... Come on, hurry up and eat your breakfast. I quickly put my hands together and then ate all at once. I quickly washed the dishes with water from the jar, then gave them to my father. He looked at me with disdain and took the dishes silently before leaving. I hugged Mayu tight and sat by the window like always. Hey, Mayu, why do I... No, never mind. I'm so hungry. Did something happen? Nobody brought me any breakfast. But I could sense more people than usual. I was tired of looking out there, so I spoke to Mayu. Hey Mayu, nobody's coming, huh? Tsuru tended to visit a lot recently, but even she wasn't here today. I reached my arm out the window and grabbed a nearby onion. If I took too many, they might say something. But you can't make an omelette without breaking some eggs. As the sun was starting to set, Tsuru came to see me, crying. Father, he... Tearfully, she slowly told me what happened. Our father died. "47 days after my father's death, I started to sense something strange with Mayu. I couldn't put it into words well, but she seemed to be enjoying herself. Breakfast. Sorry I'm late. Tsuru looked apologetic as she came in. I sat down, finding it strange, and then Tsuru started speaking as I ate. So, Mother, there was a bear. Having said that, she burst into tears, and in surprise, I put my chopsticks down and rushed over to her. She died! Mother died! It's just us now! Tsuru's screams as she cried brought me back to my senses, and I rubbed her back, trying to calm her down. Our mother died. The only family I had left now was Tsuru. One more. "57 days after our mother died, Tsuru dragged herself to see me. She brought food, but for some reason stood there silently. Finding it strange, I asked her what was wrong. "I've been having strange dreams recently," she said, and then shifted her gaze to Mayu. "Next thing I knew, I couldn't see anything. I was in this pitch black room. I turned around, sensing eyes on me, and that doll said something to me. One more, it said, with a creepy smile on its face." Tsuru screamed, and as some dishes fell loudly to the ground, I jumped in shock. With fear all over her face, Tsuru tumbled numerous times as she ran from the room. The room fell silent once more, and I slowly turned to look at Mayu. What had I done? I finally understood what that strange feeling I got from Mayu was. That smile on Mayu's face was turning into a snarl. How much time had passed since Tsuru stopped coming? I could no longer reach the onions I ate every time I got hungry. The water jug was also empty, and the rumbling of my stomach was painful. I'm so hungry. I need something to eat. Something I can eat. With blank eyes, I noticed something. Food. Food! I bit into it. It didn't appear to be very firm, so I was able to easily eat it. It's good. It's so good. It cracked each time I crunched, and a crimson flower bloomed before me. Beyond that, Mayu quietly watched me, smiling. There was a fallen tree on the mountain path, so I took a detour to descend. What's that? My eyes suddenly fell upon a small hill like a dome in the dense trees. Finding it odd, I approached it and realized there was some wooden lattice where a building seemed to be hidden in the shade of the greenery. Looking in, there appeared to be something round hidden in the greenery too. Curious, I stuck my head through the lattice to get a better look. I pulled my head back in surprise. I hit my head as I did and crouched on the ground. Enduring the pain, I opened my eyes and I could see something through the lattice. It was a slightly dirty Japanese doll with a creepy smile. December 10. Wearing a cardigan over my white robe, I opened the door to the nurse's station. Tonight, I was on the night shift with my elder colleague Matsumoto. Asada-san, good to see you. Even at night, the emergency room was always full of patients. Drunkenness, external injuries from traffic accidents, colds, sore stomachs. Sometimes there were even patients with serious burns from fires, and those who had failed to attempt their own lives. One of the characteristic features of the emergency room was that you never knew what might happen. As I looked over the files after hearing what happened before I arrived, the intercom rang. At our hospital, patients coming in from outside first had to ring the intercom to help prevent infectious diseases from spreading. It was a rule to let patients in only after they spoke to a nurse on the intercom. Matsumoto, I'll get it. I grabbed the binder with the patient questionnaires and approached the intercom receiver. As a new nurse, I dealt with nurse calls, the phone, and the intercom. I picked up the receiver. Yes, how can I help you? But what I heard in return wasn't a voice. The shrill sound of a siren pierced my left ear. Eh? Instinctively, I pulled the receiver away from my ear. But rather than the sound getting further away, the siren actually got louder. It wasn't coming from the intercom. Hey, Matsumoto, this siren. Siren? What are you talking about? Hurry up and get the patient from outside. You mean you don't... Asada-san? She hurried me out, so I decided to prioritize the patient outside over the siren. Of course I should prioritize them first. I opened the nurse's station door and entered the hall. I turned right, and the door leading outside was right there. The door was made of glass. I could see outside. Once I saw it outside, I froze on the spot. A monster, covered in red and black, stood outside. I was unable to understand what I was looking at, and suddenly I felt my consciousness begin to fade. Member. I heard a voice somewhere far away. December 10. Wearing a cardigan over my white robe, I opened the door to the nurse's station. Tonight, I was on the night shift with my elder colleague Matsumoto. Asada-san, good to see you. Even at night, the emergency room was always full of patients. Drunkenness, external injuries from traffic accidents, colds, sore stomachs. Sometimes there were even patients with serious burns from fires, and those who had failed to attempt their own lives. One of the characteristic features of the emergency room was that you never knew what might happen. But as long as I was with the veteran Matsumoto, I'd be okay. I was sure of it. As I looked over the files after hearing what happened before I arrived, the intercom rang. Matsumoto, I'll get it. I walked over to the intercom to pick up the receiver. But Matsumoto stood up from her chair and took the binder before I could. No, I can't let you always deal with these. I'll do it, she said, and picked up the receiver to handle the patient outside. As she started talking, a siren blared. An earthquake? Fire? It would be a different sound if there was a sudden change to a patient in the hospital. Matsumoto? What siren is this? But Matsumoto was still talking to the patient on the other end of the intercom. No, not so much a conversation, but more of a quarrel. Like I said, we cannot deal with that sort of business here. Asada has nothing to do with this. Asada has to be here. The moment she screamed that, the station door opened. A monster covered in red and black stood there. I was unable to understand what I was looking at, and suddenly I felt my consciousness begin to fade. Member. December 10? I wore a cardigan over my white robe. Tonight was especially cold. Matsumoto-san, can we turn the aircon up a little? Yeah, let's do that. After getting permission from Matsumoto-san, I turned the temperature up. There was a beep, and then a warm breeze quietly blew from the aircon. Looks like it's going to snow again tonight. It'll probably pile up again. On snowy days like this, it was rare to see patients. Normally we didn't get many emergency patients, but when it was silver outside like today, it would be hard for even the ambulance to get in. Not much to do today, huh? Asada-san, you can just look over the patient's charts. As she drank cocoa from her mug, Matsumoto-san gently stretched. If that was what she wanted, then I'd deal with the leftover work today. At that moment, as I looked over the files after hearing what happened before I arrived, the outside intercom rang. At the same time, there was a bang. It was the sound of Matsumoto-san dropping her mug of cocoa. Matsumoto-san, are you okay? You'll burn yourself. Why? Huh? Why? We keep doing this over and over, so why do you keep coming? Matsumoto-san, what are you saying? Don't take Asada away. She's here with me. Her angry voice wasn't directed at me. It was to the thing behind me. Remember. That siren was so loud. Asada-san. It's okay. You just have to stay here. You'll be okay as long as you're with me. So let's go together, okay? Remember. No! Remember, you mustn't stay there. I'll take Asada with me. Remember, you're sleeping. Asada is... No! Why must I be the only one? Asada-san! Why must I be the only one who dies? Asada should as well. She should die too. December 15th, Wednesday, 10:33 a.m. There was a familiar sound. What was it? Ah, it was the ECG monitor. This alarm. It was the sound for artificial breathing. There was an outpatient using a ventilator. Who was it? Me? Asada-san? My blurry vision slowly cleared. I looked to the side, and there I saw Kanzaki, one of my classmates from nursing school. Asada-san, are you there? Hey, are you there? I tried to reply, but no voice came out. The inside of my throat felt strange and like something was pressuring it. I tried to cough, and the ventilator alarm went off. Why was I here like this? December 25th, Saturday, 11:12 a.m. Congratulations on your recovery, Asada-san. Kanzaki-san, thank you for everything. Not at all. I'm just glad you're better. When you were brought here with crush syndrome, honestly, I thought it was already too late. Matsumoto-san was like that next to me, right? So, it's not unreasonable you'd think that about me too. 15 days earlier, on the night of December 10th, there was an earthquake directly beneath the hospital. Matsumoto-san and I were working that night, and we were buried under the rubble for a week, where we almost starved to death. Even now, I still clearly remember being crushed under it all. The pressure on my head and chest, and the various sirens that sounded from both near and far away. And then Matsumoto, looking at me as we lay next to each other under the rubble. She always teased me when I struggled with work. You're not cut out for this line of work. Why don't you quit? She said these things to me daily. It was the same even as we fell victim to the earthquake. She said as she stared at me, "You should have died with me." Those were her last words. I remembered the dream I had on the edge of life and death. Was Matsumoto really trying to take me with her? This is a story one of the older students heard from an older student who heard it from a student even older than him. A story you might call a tradition at this point. There were rumours going around school about this particular issue. Did you hear that the sewing room is cursed? No way! If so, let's check it out after school. The guy next to me said with a smile. I originally heard this story from my club captain, who had already graduated. You mustn't tell this story to anyone outside the club, otherwise it'll get embellished and the real story won't get told. If the steps to be taken get muddled, then there's no way to protect yourself from the curse. You must do everything you can to stay safe, I remember him saying, a serious look on his face. Alright, I'll meet you in front of the home ec room after school. As I remembered the club captain's story, I suddenly found myself agreeing to meet my friend. I gave a vague answer, and he left the room with a smile. After club activities were done and everyone else had gone home, I waited in front of the home ec room, and finally he came. I guided him to the sewing room just beyond. With nobody there, the room was kind of creepy. There were handmade dolls, stuffed animals, a mysterious mask made of clay, and so on. It felt like all these inorganic objects were looking our way. So, how do we check? he asked as we walked around the room. I explained the summary of the curse. It went like this. 1. One of the items in the sewing room, such as the dolls, was the source of the curse. 2. At regular intervals, things around the source of the curse had to be moved around. 3. When moving things, you must not touch the source of the curse. 4. Everything other than the source of the curse has to be moved. 5. 6. The next day, you must not look at anything until the source of the curse has changed places with another item. 7. The curse will then be split up with this other item and weakened. Wait, there was one step I couldn't remember. The only day I could hear these steps from him was on graduation, and because we couldn't have anything to write on then, I had no way of confirming what it was. All the other club members had also gone home, so I couldn't ask them either. Well, rumours were just that after all. I didn't have to worry about it that much. I understood that they wanted people to clean around the items in the sewing room at regular intervals. I think everyone was aware of that. "Let's check it out," he said, and started moving things. "Hey, don't just start moving things," I warned him, but he showed no signs of stopping. "This curse." He started talking as he moved things around. "You have to start at the beginning." What was he talking about? Just as I was about to ask him, I remembered. 5. You must decide on somebody to carry this out, and they must do it alone. All the colour drained from my face, and I tried to stop him. "And done," he muttered and then laughed. Scared, I opened the door. But beyond it was just darkness, and a terrifying voice echoed. I turned around in fear as the voice followed me, but there was nothing there but darkness as well. As I stood there, dumbfounded, something like a white string wrapped around me, and my consciousness was pulled into the darkness. Was I dreaming? Relieved, I tried to stand up, but I couldn't move, nor even speak. Looking at the mirror in front of me, I'd become a stuffed toy. The door slid open. I turned to look in that direction, and he was looking at me, smiling. "Oh, someone moved everything around for us. Nice. I hate doing that." I heard it was O-kun. Oh? Is that someone's name? Whatever. I spent half my life at this school. I'd spent more than half a decade as a caretaker at this school with so many memories, and now it is closed. I'd experienced all sorts of things through my work, but I would never forget the bronze statue in the courtyard. Even several years after the school's closure, the fear has yet to dissipate. There was a stain on the foundation of the statue ever since the school opened. that no matter how much I cleaned or scraped it, just never went away. The stain spread so much that we had to repaint the foundation. It might sound unbelievable, but simply staring at the statue was enough to make you feel dizzy and nauseous. It was like some unfathomable people were somewhere nearby, calling out to you. Plus, there were frequent unsolved incidents that had taken place on the school grounds, so numerous parents and guardians often complained. This was one of the ominous unsolved incidents. A student's head was cut off. Almost every year, one student fell victim, and their head would remain missing. At first, people thought someone was targeting the students, but then the same thing happened to a staff member on patrol. But this always happened in front of the statue in the courtyard. In order to prevent more incidents, the order went out that people were no longer allowed to move around alone, and a staff member had to accompany students too. This seemed to be effective, as the incident stopped. Looking back on it now, just what on earth happened back then? The school has closed now, so there's no way to find out. I just pray it never happens again. Something happy happened the other day. Someone calling themselves a former graduate came to see me, saying he wanted to see his former school one last time. Even though the school was closed, he still followed the rules, and so I agreed to join him. The next day would be my final field trip with a former student. I intend to carry out my final mission as the caretaker. I believe it will be the most moving, unforgettable day of my life. Caretaker F. The man, just slightly past middle age, let out a deep sigh as he closed the diary he was holding. What on earth happened? A young man who appeared to be his subordinate muttered as he seemed perplexed by the sight before him. A dubious expression rose on the elder man's face, and he grabbed the wireless inside the car. The victim is the caretaker F. I believe the incident occurred while he was on patrol. His head appears to have been crushed beneath the foundation of the bronze statue. We'll continue the investigation. Frowning, the man ended the call and muttered, "How are we supposed to report this?" It's like his head was sucked beneath the foundation of the statue. I mean, come on. Before long, the forensics officer arrived. Noticing us, he approached with his tools. Then his eyes opened wide and his feet seemed to stop as if being held back. "It's the curse," he muttered, his footsteps heavy as he approached the statue and put his tools down. His face stiff, the forensics officer nervously extended his hand and touched the caretaker's body. The headless caretaker's body slipped out. At the same time, the man who appeared to be a subordinate read the entry and exit control form he was holding. According to this, 2 people were at the school on the day of the incident. The person who recorded this was the victim, caretaker F. The name of the other visitor was Graduate O. Someone called out to me as I left the classroom to go home. "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" The student's eyes roamed around restlessly. What I'm about to tell you is a really mysterious, no, strange story. His eyes continued roaming around the area. I don't even understand it myself, but it's not a lie. He started talking without even waiting for my response. One of my childhood friends said that he saw a female student he didn't know here. That was a pretty common urban legend. A common legend without much credibility. It was after school, just like now, and he could smell something after leaving the classroom. He stopped and covered his mouth when he heard a voice coming from behind him. "Excuse me, where is the staff room?" He turned around, and there was a girl in a uniform he didn't know standing there, and it seemed the smell was coming from her. "Go down the stairs and it's on the left," he told her, still covering his mouth. "Thank you," she said, her voice seeming to disappear, and then she wandered away. That's so weird. This is the end of the West Hall. Isn't it weird that she was able to approach him from behind? Plus, he said, and his voice went pale. Do I even have a childhood friend? Who was it that told me this story? Hey, this person who was apparently my childhood friend. Who were they? The student was clearly confused. I know that it doesn't make any sense. I'll go get you a drink, I said to the clearly unstable guy, and then went to the entrance to buy a drink. But when I came back, he was nowhere to be seen. It was one hot summer. I was walking down a footpath between some rice fields. There were no other people around, but then, before long, I ran into a single woman. What's she doing on an empty footpath at night like this? Curious, I called out to her. But she didn't respond. Instead, she just stared at me. I pushed back the fear threatening to swallow me and asked her again. Ma'am, it's dangerous out here at night. Why are you here? Actually, I'm looking for something. If you don't mind, could you help me look for it? She said, and I decided to help her look. What exactly are you looking for? Something very important, the woman answered. We searched for a while, and then I heard her scream, "Found it!" behind me. Seemed she'd found what she was looking for. Normally, I'd be happy for her, but I realized she was pointing right at me, with her back still facing me. Why were you looking for me? The woman then put her finger down. Then, With her eyes downcast, she slowly turned to face me. Her laugh seemed to tear through the silence, and then she screamed in an even more crazed voice. "Thanks to you, I'm finally able to escape this hellhole." Did you think that I was some normal woman? You stupid man. The woman finally lifted her face. The next moment, her expression warped. There was blood all around her mouth. A silent scream escaped my lips at the sight of it. I barely dodged her attack, and I used that opportunity to run away as fast as I possibly could. What on earth was that? I never wanted to go near there again. You should take care on dark night roads as well. Let me tell you a story from when I was working as one of those so-called V-livers. One night, about 3 months into it, a female V-liver, I'll call her B, joined my stream. She extolled the virtues of my voice, how I looked as a liver, and even the photos I put up on social media of my cooking. It certainly didn't feel bad to receive such praise, so the next night, I went to her stream to thank her. A good number of her listeners were leaving tips in the chat and buying her stamps and such. And so, thinking it was normal to do so, I did the same as everyone else to thank her. When she saw that, she thanked me profusely with tears in her eyes. And then, finally, said the following. "Hey, won't you be my partner?" I readily agreed. Looking back on it now, it wasn't something I should have decided in just 2 days. After we became partners, whenever B came to visit my stream, she would frequently request that we stream together. So basically, a collaboration stream. I enjoyed talking to her, so I didn't feel the need to refuse. But then, the listeners who had been with me since the beginning started to decrease. The more I collaborated with her, the more this became clear. And, in the end, most of my listeners were her regulars that she brought with her. About 2 months after we first got to know each other, B once again weirdly praised my karaoke singing, and then said, "Hey, why don't we form a vocal unit?" Once again, I readily agreed. I never imagined that after that, I would end up dealing with all of the editing of our videos, drawing the illustrations, and all that sort of stuff. After that, I started to cut both my streaming time and my sleep time. I put my all into making videos of my unit with B, as well as helping her with her birthday plans. No, it wasn't help. B left 99% of the work to me. Each time she'd say things like, "You're my partner, you're my number one, I love you," feeding me only with words. And before I knew it, I even started chipping away at my own meal times as well. Another 3 or so months after that, B said something after weirdly praising my personality and choice of words when speaking. Hey, why don't you regularly send me some of the things I want from now on? I have a list. I wasn't able to reply. There was no reason left to say no. I hadn't even noticed how weak my own body and health had become. Next thing I knew, I was in the hospital. I didn't really remember passing out. My mother came to see me between her chores. She told me that, while I was passed out, I muttered B-san's name. She then looked up on the internet what type of person this B-san was. Apparently, there were several other people just like me that she had used. And then my mother added, "That girl, she's apparently doing the same thing to another liver right now. I hope it doesn't end up the same way it did with you." She then showed me the video on social media with the conversation between the two. "You're my number one!" She had said the same thing to me in the past. It was located roughly a 10-minute walk after entering the alley from the side street. A dust-covered multi-tenant building that looked like it might collapse at any minute. It was the third sign from the bottom of the board. Fortune-telling house, Gede. No matter how many times I see it, that name seems awfully shady. Gede. It was the name of the voodoo kami-sama who reigned over death and fertility. My mental image of fortune-telling was something a little more sparkling, though. I guess that suits her, though. There was hair and tobacco all over the stairs, and no sign they were ever cleaned. "It's been a while, Professor. What is it this time?" Ghosts? Curses? Or maybe a new type of killer? Whenever I was summoned, she was always involved in something bad. Cigarette smoke filled the room. The air hung heavy like it always did, so much so that you could almost mistake it for being on fire. "Ah, Murotani, what's this? You're unexpectedly early this time." She was my former professor, who was fired for misconduct involving cigarettes. And there she was on the other side of the room, smoke hanging heavily in the air. "Have you already had lunch?" "Yeah, at Nonnon in front of the station." "Ah, the boiled eggs are free there, aren't they? And speaking of eggs, it seems our little burden this time was something strange born of an egg." "An egg?" "An acquaintance told me about it. Apparently one of his students saw something strange while doing some field work. Even though they're still an undergraduate, they're a guest in the same business as us. She said it had something to do with an egg, but it was still too abstract for me to understand anything. There was no way they found the fossil of Humpty Dumpty or something, right? If so, then that would be the biggest discovery of the century. It would be comparable to the Japanese Jewish ancestral theory. As we chatted, I cleaned up the cigarette butts around the room. If a guest was coming, then at the very least, we should make the place look clean. "Come in! Welcome to the fortune-telling house." just as I was trying to push the smell of cigarette smoke outside. A bald youth with a head like a boiled egg came in, looking worried. Even the sound of his footsteps resembled that of an egg breaking.
Professor, have you ever heard of the egg forcing ceremony before?
That's the thing they do at Washinomiya Shrine in the Ienaka area, right? At that shrine, I believe they view birds as divine, and so they have a custom not to eat eggs, yes? Egg forcing ceremony. It was something I'd heard about on the internet before, when people were talking about strange rituals. A tengu forces people to eat all the eggs, piled high in a bowl, but the participants must steadfastly refuse. Supposing the egg-forcing ceremony also took place outside of the Washinomiya Shrine. Long, long ago. Impossible. But I've seen it.
Professor, what's all this about?
Are you listening? The egg-forcing ceremony that's performed in the Ienaka area. It originally came from the rice-forcing ceremony performed in that same area. The chief priests and the Shrine Preservation Society gathered some event consultants and created this event in 2001. There is no actual history to this egg-forcing ceremony.
And you say it happened long ago?
The youth nodded. For some reason, that gesture looked just like when you broke an egg. I was doing field work in Hokuriku until just the other day. There are still some faint traces of interesting traditions out there, and someone from the village hall introduced me to an expert.
So, do you like shrines and such? You look like you do. You're bald like a monk and all. Let me tell you something real interesting. There used to be a splendid shrine up in the mountains long ago. This happened over 50 years ago now, so everyone has forgotten about it. But that building is still there.
Climb the hiking trail for 40 minutes, and then it splits. And then walk another 10 minutes. All you'll hear is the sound of your own footsteps. It's a little unsettling. When I got there, I was exhausted and stopped to rest. I sat down, and the breeze in the shrine grounds was refreshing.
Excuse me, sir. What are you doing here?
Suddenly, I heard a voice. A girl with a bob haircut and not a single speck of dirt on her yukata was standing there.
Are you tired? Hungry? Here, you can have this.
As I ate the egg, for some reason, she kept staring at me. I see. The professor nodded. I was curious after I came back down the mountain, so I asked some villagers about it. And apparently, there was a tradition at that shrine where eating eggs was taboo. Do you have any records of what you asked? The young man pulled a small notebook out of his pocket. It was full of tightly packed details written in tiny letters. The professor quickly flipped through the pages and then slammed the book shut. So, you're assuming that this shrine performs the egg-forcing ceremony from the answers you got then? Yes. So you think that I'm wrong? There are a few questionable points. First, If this festival took place over half a century ago, it's hard to say the old man's memories are still correct. Second, the questions you asked seem to be a little leading. You've pushed your own ideas on those you're talking to far too much. It's important to be objective. But that alone wasn't the only reason he would visit somewhere called the fortune-telling house. There was no reason to turn to a third-rate fortune-teller, a former professor who had been expelled from university. But if eating eggs isn't forbidden at that temple, then I can't think of any other reason why I would have been cursed. I can hear something. Ever since I came down from the mountain, it has never gone away. According to the young man, it sounded like an egg breaking. The sound would come suddenly from deep inside his stomach without warning. I thought I was just imagining things, but I was wrong. You mean other people have heard it too? The man nodded. At the same time, there was a sound like a small egg breaking. I mean, there's something strange about this, right? Why on earth would a girl have been at that abandoned shrine all the way up the mountain? Why was she wearing a yukata during this season, and why did she make me eat a boiled egg? But it's not just the sound. Something feels strange inside my stomach. There's this weird pain. There's something round, like eggs rolling around inside my stomach. It's a curse. It has to be. It's weird. It's not right. Maybe I'm gonna die. That girl must have been a monster. He kept muttering incoherently, and then an ashtray hit his egg-like head. Calm down. The piles of ashes in the tray went flying everywhere. The youth writhed in agony while I grew more fed up. The professor continued to talk, with no sign of emotion on her face. Hey, boy, let's suppose for a moment the girl who brought you the egg was supernatural. If we do, then we already face a contradiction. I nodded as I wrote something in my notebook with a pen. Making someone eat an egg at a shrine where eating eggs is forbidden. It would be more appropriate to think of this as an evil spirit, right? But it would be strange for such an evil creature to be on sacred ground. So, if they were, that ground was no longer sacred. And if it was no longer sacred, then you've no longer committed a taboo causing you to be cursed, yes? It should merely be nothing more than the shell of a shrine that its believers forgot about long ago. That girl was no doubt human. It's not strange for old customs such as wearing a yukata to bed to exist in old mountain villages. The naughty little girl ran out of her house still dressed in her sleepwear to play in the mountains. The truth is no doubt something more like this, don't you think? So then, what about that sound? It feels like eggs rolling around in my stomach. The professor spoke with a serious look on her face. Perhaps the egg was rotten, and you just have a stomachache. Are you for real? I'm very for real. Here's some medicine that should help with that. Take it once you get home. The young man stood up, looking pale. How much should I pay you? He asked anxiously. So, what do you really think? The professor took a cigarette out of her pocket. Smoke danced in the air. I think he ran into something not very nice. The hypothesis she came up with had aspects that could not be covered by the bounds of common sense. For example, why was the girl's yukata so clean? Was it possible to walk up the mountain for an hour and not get dirty? And those strange symptoms couldn't really be written off as simply falling ill. Or maybe a kami-sama really did appear and offer him a forbidden egg. That's how the egg-forcing ceremony goes at Washinomiya Shrine, right? It's a test, just like that. It could be nothing more than the kami-sama being deliberately mean. After all, they're not too different from evil spirits. Deliberately mean. That's probably the one thing he didn't want to hear. The fee the professor took from him sure felt overcharged, coming from a fellow university student. But that's not the real problem, the professor said. The problem wasn't who the girl really was, or even what the shrine really was. The important question is, what did he really eat, huh? You see it often in fairy tales, right? Stories of tanuki that transform things and such. You think it's food, but then it really turns out to be like horse dung or something. That's right. Right. Horse dung would be preferable to other things. But this thing that looked like an egg, it was something terrifying. What if it was something dreadful? A type of egg incubating in his stomach? Or what if it wasn't an egg at all, but rather some sort of curse? I hope that laxative isn't too late, the professor muttered. Hey, Murotani, what do you think the lesson from this incident was? After hesitating for a moment, I started quickly writing something in my notepad. Don't be fooled by outward appearances. When the professor saw it, she nodded, satisfied. Like, the egg you get on top of spaghetti at the convenience store is nothing more than an egg-like sauce, etc. When it comes to women, if they put makeup on, they become someone entirely different in an instant. But then, while you look disheveled on the outside, you are on the inside too. The professor looked at me with a difficult expression on her face. Have you ever heard the saying, a round egg can be cut into a square? Professor, I think you are quite the unique and wonderful individual. It was probably easier for her to live feigning ignorance over things. Suddenly, I remembered a Russian proverb. You can't teach an egg to be a chicken. I closed my notebook. I pedaled my bike through the downpour. I worked in food delivery, which was a popular job lately. I failed to find a job after graduating from university, and I developed a fear of interviews after my failures. And so, after failing to find proper work, I started this job instead. This was the type of job anyone could do, as long as you had a bike and a phone. Ugh, it's cold. Trembling, I arrived at the apartment building for my delivery. I think it was the 4th floor, yeah? I checked the address on my phone to make sure I was correct, and then made my way over to the elevator. But there were large letters on it that said, out of use. That's just my luck. My shoulders drooped, but I didn't have any time to slack. I quickly climbed the stairs, heading for the 4th floor. Huffing and puffing, I arrived at the apartment in question. "It's your food delivery," I said in a pathetic voice through the intercom. "Coming!" I was greeted by a girl around the same age as me. To be honest, she was really cute. From the bottom of my heart, I regretted how pathetic I looked. "Here you are." I couldn't stop my voice from sounding nervous. But she didn't laugh at me. Instead, she gave me a refreshing smile and said, "Thanks very much." I fell head over heels for her. But I didn't have the courage to talk to her, so I just quickly handed the food over and then left. Wow, she was cute as hell, I accidentally said out loud, and then I panicked and looked around. But other than her apartment, I couldn't sense anyone else around. It seemed she was the only person living on this floor. I sighed in relief. My legs felt somewhat lighter on the way home. Did I fall victim to a Kami-sama's prank? After that, I got more and more deliveries for her apartment. Of course, I was overjoyed. I was frustrated we hadn't yet had a single proper conversation, but I was still satisfied, and it gave me more motivation to do my job. But the one thing that bothered me was that elevator that was constantly broken. Thanks to that, I always had to climb the stairs to reach the top floor. I'd even started to lose weight. Then one day, several months after I first delivered to her apartment, something unbelievable happened. I handed over her food and went to leave like I always did, but she stopped me. Yes? Can you come back tonight, outside of your work? I want to get something for dinner, so... Sure, I'd love to. She actually invited me to dinner. I replied happily. That night, I dressed up and made my way back towards her apartment building. It's kinda dark, huh? It was the first time I'd come to her apartment at night. There were numerous apartments, and yet hers was the only one with lights on. I didn't think much of it and climbed the stairs. What was going to happen in her apartment tonight? My heart swelled with expectations. Step by step, I climbed the stairs slowly so as not to build up a sweat. I finally arrived at her apartment and I pressed the intercom button. "Ah, welcome! Come in!" "Excuse me." The moment I stepped inside, she closed the front door and hugged me. "I've been wanting to do this for so long." Me too." Swept away in the moment, I hugged her back. That was the happiest I'd ever been in my entire life. Then she patted my stomach. I love a toned body. "Ah, I lost a lot of weight because that elevator's broken." I pretended to be cool so as not to show the pounding of my heart. Then she said something strange. "I really love toned flesh," she said, and then took a bite out of it right in front of me. Today's homework is to discover the meaning behind your own name. Go talk to your parents and relatives about when you were younger. Then I want you to write down what you were like as a child, the sort of things you used to do, etc. We'll be using this for some group work. Several students groaned at the teacher's homework assignment. We were junior high students. I didn't really want to look back on my childhood and discuss it with my classmates. Don't you me. And don't forget to bring at least one photo from your childhood as well. Alright, that's the end of class for today. Right as the teacher stopped speaking, the school bell rang. The student on day duty told everyone to stand, we bowed, and then class was over. A photo, huh? I thought, putting my notes and books into my bag, and then my friend seated in front of me turned around to speak. A photo from when we were kids is so embarrassing. So said Misaki, who was in the same club as me. Right, I have to find a cute photo. You have to find one? I don't even know where our photos are. She smiled like, what the hell am I supposed to do? Everyone in the class got into groups and we got to talking about the homework. Just as everyone was getting worked up and kind of noisy, the homeroom teacher came in. After homeroom was done, it was time for club activities. I'd have to rush to get there before the older students did. We'd have to continue this after club. Thanks for today! Once club activities were over, I watched the older students return to the club room with their rackets, and then us first graders had to clean everything up. I'm tired. I let out a big sigh and then rested my chin on the court brush. For real. But really, they make just us first graders do all the cleanup. Misaki muttered as she quickly cleaned the court, and then Hinako from Sigumi approached us. Hey, did your class also get the homework with the photo? Yep. Even with different teachers, we got the same homework, huh? Oh yeah, the photo. We've got to find one. Misaki smiled as she returned, having forgotten about the homework, and she put the court brush back where she got it from. Other people are gonna see it, so I've got to find the cutest one I can. We returned to the classroom while still talking about it, and then I got changed and left right away. After dinner, I opened the photo albums I got from the shelf. I wanted to get my homework done right away, so I started looking for a cute photo. There aren't many photos of just me. Maybe this one will do. I took one photo out of the album, and then decided to ask about the reason for my name and some stories from when I was a kid. When I told my mother about my homework, she told me about the meaning behind my name. So Dad picked my name. Yep, apparently it was the same name as a popular idol at the time, so people made fun of him for it a bit. She laughed and then told me about everyone making fun of him. Dad, who was watching TV at the time, turned to look at us like he wanted to interject, but when Mum looked back at him, she laughed again. Do you have any other stories from when I was a kid? Come to think of it. After she told me a few stories, she seemed to remember something which she then told me. Okay, so please get into your groups. At the teacher's sign, everyone started moving their desks into their groups. Now, please show your photos to each other while you tell everyone about the meaning behind your name.
Please also share the stories you heard as well. Everyone in the classroom started talking. We decided what order we'd go in by playing rock, scissors, paper, and then started talking. As we looked at everyone's childhood photos, we made fun of each other, and then, before I knew it, it was my turn. My father chose my name. But apparently they were originally going to give me a different name. There were some arguments before they finally settled on the name I have now. When I asked my mother to tell me a story from my childhood, she told me something strange. "What was it? What was it?" my friends asked excitedly, and so I began talking. Apparently, long ago, our family used to be in the shrine business, and my great-grandmother was a shrine maiden. But because the family only gave birth to boys, they had to give up the shrine maiden work. Apparently my grandfather could see ghosts, and his daughter, my aunt, inherited that same blood. As the story took a turn for the supernatural, even I grew worried. But my friends were really into it, so I kept going. On the other hand, my mother was completely different and had no sixth sense whatsoever. But when I was born, she said something strange happened. Everyone leaned forward to listen, and I lowered the volume of my voice. When they renovated our house, they apparently held a ceremony to purify the site. Apparently, when the priest saw me, he said, "This child has incredible power. It would be best not to leave it be, so we should cleanse her as well." According to the priest, it was some type of spiritual power. And so, they apparently cleansed me too. Don't you think that's weird? I waited for my friends to reply, and then one of them said after thinking it over, "What type of cleansing ceremony was it?" That was a good question. What on earth had they cleansed? "It must have been something bad," another friend said, as though continuing the same train of thought. Stop! You're scaring me. I won't be able to sleep." Once we were done messing around, for some reason, I felt a lot better. Did talking to people really change one's heart that much? There was no point thinking about it any further, so I decided to forget all about it. I'm tired. Because we were in the busy period at work, I was also doing a lot of overtime even though it was only my second year on the job, and I was getting home later than usual. I ate the food that was prepared for me while my family watched a ghost program on TV. I drank as I watched, and then suddenly, I remembered that story. Oh yeah! I heard that story about being cleansed when I was a baby when I was in junior high. Huh? You know, that story about me having strong power when I was born and when the priest came to cleanse the house. What are you talking about? My mother looked at me strangely. Come on now. She's acting weird. She's the one who told me the story. But she kept saying she knew nothing about it and had never heard such a story, so I gave up and returned to my room. My head was a mess. What does she mean she doesn't know? Then what was that story? I could still clearly remember the story, so why couldn't my mother? I decided to remember the story bit by bit one more time. Then I
I realized something strange. Something strange. That was the ceremony to cleanse the land. Our house had been renovated only once in the past. It was an old house that my great-grandmother lived in, and when I was born, there were no plans to renovate it. But it deteriorated quickly, and when I was in the 3rd grade, they decided to fix it up. And so, based on that, they decided to carry out the cleansing ceremony at the same time too. The ceremony I heard about from my mother when the house was being renovated never existed, and it certainly didn't happen when I was born. So then, what about the statement from the priest that this child has incredible power? How could we explain the situation where I had to be cleansed? The ceremony I apparently took part in then, what was it supposed to have cleansed? And why didn't my mother, who I heard this story from, remember it? What on earth was this story she told me about the cleansing ceremony? When I asked my friends who I told that same story to, they were confused as well. This memory existed only within me, and it was something I still couldn't understand, even now.